Now I'm going to talk a little bit about Google Webmaster Tools. So I'll just quickly recap where we've come from. We did a little bit of an intro to SEO, what it is, the Google algorithm and what they look at. And then we got to the point where we're saying, well, we're doing stuff, how do we test and measure? And measuring stuff was Google Analytics. We went through some of them. We spent a fair bit of time going through all those reports. So now we're actually going to look at another part of measuring, which is Google Webmaster Tools and also Bing Webmaster Tools. They're both really good. They're nowhere near as popular as Google Analytics. Just about everyone's heard of Google Analytics and uses it. But these two tools, Google Webmaster Tools and Bing, and especially Bing Webmaster Tools, which is actually really good, are underutilized in my opinion. I think they're really valuable. So I want to go through those with you. And they're not so much about reporting on what people are doing on the site, but it's more about how the site's performing and any issues with them. So I'll just give you a bit of an intro to Google Webmaster Tools. And again, you'd normally set up your Google account and you create a Google Webmaster Tools account and then you submit your site. There's a bit of a different validation process to analytics, but once it's all up and running, you kind of get, it's a much simpler, nowhere near as complex as analytics, but it gives you a bunch of things. And so again, I'm just looking at the Fire Bootcamp. What it gives you is a bit of a status on how the site's performing, if there's any errors, search queries and sitemaps. And I'll dig into a few of these things, but one of the really nice things that you can do is if there are errors, you can actually sign up for notifications in the preferences. If there are key issues that happen with your site, Google Webmaster Tools will actually email you and it'll say, we've noticed a large increase in errors on your site. That's really useful. That's a handy thing. So really recommend for that alone. And the other thing it'll do is, because it looks at your robots.txt file, if your robots.txt file blocks a whole bunch of stuff, you'll actually get an email notification saying, oh, robots is blocking your entire site or something like that. So it's a really good way to get notified. So for those reasons alone, you should sign up. But let me tell you some of the things it shows you. You also get site messages, which is just, if something bad's happened or there's something. We've linked it to Google Analytics. I'll show you how that links in a second. Search appearance, don't worry too much about that. Structured data we're not going to go into today. Site links, though, is something that you might find interesting. See here when we searched Fire Bootcamp and we actually had 2 links down here. You'll often see 4 links or sometimes 6. Used to be referred to as the 6-pack that you'd get for a brand term. They're actually site links. And sometimes you find that there's a site link, and you have no control over those. Google just decides, these are the site links, because it thinks as a user experience you're searching for something. It says, well, you're searching, this you will find useful. And that's not too bad actually. Google's decided that the employers page and the FAQs page are useful. That's actually pretty good. Sorry, Adam. Do you want the mic? Yep.
Why does Fire Bootcamp have 2 site links, but the other sites underneath them don't? Google's deciding, why is it decided to put 2 on Fire Bootcamp and none on the rest?
Yeah, so that's a good question. How and why, when Google decides how many site links to put is Google. It's really hard to influence, but generally the bigger the site you are, the bigger brand you are, and it's normally for brand terms that you'll find these site links. It's not normal, like if you did SharePoint Consultants or something, you probably wouldn't see site links underneath. You might, but it's less likely. Google just decides, I'm going to test 2. I think that's a good user experience. If you're a big brand, you might see 4, where Google says, oh no, this is obvious, actually, if I typed in Basecamp or some other tool, you might see more. You can't really influence which ones it shows or how many. The only influence you can do is actually ask for some of them to be removed. For example, if it points, if your privacy page is one of the site links at the site, you don't want people, you'd go and remove it. Adam.
Is it based on the domain? Like, what will happen if you put there Adam Kogan? Well, you do it on my domain?
Oh yes, sorry, good question. These site links directly relate to this domain, and you can actually get more results. So it's basically said, I've searched for the term Fire Bootcamp. It says, look, you're probably after this brand term for this site, and here's what we think. And that's been personalised for me, by the way, because Google knows I'm probably after that. Let's try Adam Kogan and see what we get. So SharePoint's showing. Okay.
Seeing if it matches the domain.
Oh, right. Still, no, Google still thinks that's more important. And that's your employee page, which has been around for years, right? So it thinks that's more important. But here's the thing, if we actually clicked through to this, the question was how they decided as well. There's a whole bunch of factors that Google uses. Some of them are click-throughs. So if everyone that searches for Adam Kogan ends up clicking that link, the Adam Kogan blog, Google looks at that click data and actually will probably boost its rankings for personalised results at least in the future. Sorry, yes, question here.
So you said that it personalises for you. So if I'm doing it for my site, how do I remove my preferences? Because I don't want to know what I want to look. I want to know what everyone's going to see.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. Ultimately, you can't remove personalisation altogether, because even your IP address is used as location for some stuff. But normally, if I'm doing a quick check, I'll just pop into incognito mode, and I'll have a look there, so we might do that. You probably get something, looks pretty similar actually. But you can do that. You could actually remove all your cookies on your browser. The other thing you can do is use proxy tools. Depends how deep you want to go. So one of the ones that I use is Watopia. Has people heard of Watopia? It's great if you want to get Netflix. So basically what it does, it's this little, I think I've actually lost internet. No, it's going. But basically Watopia, this is way off topic, but possibly more interesting, come out of nothing else. You can basically, it just uses a whole bunch of proxies to set your location. And so this is useful, like say I'm doing an audit for a client in Melbourne, I can just say, look, I want to pretend that I'm coming from, I can choose gateways, I'll choose, where are we? Here we go, connect Melbourne. And so then, from what I'm doing, Google will think I'm in Melbourne and give me results personalised to that location, things like that. And then if I did it within incognito mode, I might be able to block out some of the previous history, that kind of stuff. And the other thing, yeah, so I mentioned Watopia because if you ever want to get Netflix, you just log into San Francisco or whatever, and then you can access Netflix and stuff like that. But that question it's actually a complex question, and trying to get some kind of completely clean profile is actually quite hard. There's another thing that you can do, which I think is, let me just see if it gets this at the end. Don't know if this still works. We used to be able to go, no, I won't try it because I can't remember, but there was actually, I think it was a PID, you could set equal to 0 at the end of the query string, and it would set personalization to 0. Remind me later and I'll just check that up. But there is actually a way in the query string to kind of remove personalization. So have I answered all the questions? Did I answer yours, Adam? So getting back to, how we went down that path was because I was saying in Webmaster Tools, search appearance, don't worry too much, but site links is where you can actually demote a site link. So if your privacy page is showing, you can just put it in here and demote it. It takes about a week, sometimes longer, for Google to say, oh, okay, I'll remove it. The other thing you can do is just put it in your robots.txt file, block that from Google, which is quite often what I do. But so search appearance, the things that are interesting is you can see how many of your pages are in the Google index. Here's the index status. Just loading. It's like my Wi-Fi keeps dropping out every so often. But there's our index status. What this is saying is that Google, in the Google index, there's 146 pages from Fire Bootcamp that it's indexed, and you can kind of see we probably submitted it, looks like then, around November, and then Google's given it a bit more love in the last month or two. There's also things, search traffic. Here's where I use it the most. This is the queries, or this is a representative sample of queries that Google is actually showing the Fire Bootcamp site for. Now, I say representative because it's never the full amount. Like, this is telling us that we got, for this date range, we got 173 clicks come to the Fire Bootcamp site. Now, we actually know from analytics that we got more than that. I'm actually looking at organic search traffic. We actually got about 316 visits. So these numbers never match up. So this is, don't get worried about that. Don't kind of say, oh, you know, this number's vastly different. You know, it could be cause to dig deeper, but discrepancies this large aren't that unusual. But they're still useful because it shows you representative data. Now, what's interesting about queries, and the reason I like it, is because Google Analytics doesn't give you much keyword data now. Have you seen this not provided keyword? You ever come across this before? What Google is doing is they used to give you the keyword data when people searched for something. Oh, I searched for SharePoint. They would give you that keyword data in analytics. About a year ago, they started pulling back and closing the gate on that so that you don't get it. And I won't go into the whole discussion of how frustrating and how annoying that is from Google's part and how lame their reasons are for doing it. I'll just say it's a fact. And so you can see here, almost 100%, you know, there's only 20 or so visits that we actually got any keyword data for, and it's almost not useful. It's all been lumped into this not provided keyword. So this is another area where Google Webmaster Tools actually does give you some insight into the terms that you're ranking for, because there's an average position here, the clicks you're getting, and it'll even show you, actually I'll just bump this up. Sorry.
Can I guess that that one of the reasons Google are giving, which I don't know, is to get traffic from analytics over to the Webmaster Tools?
So is your question, why did they stop doing it in analytics?
Why they stopped doing it?
Okay, shall I go down that
May
path?
as well.
I'll tell you why. Their reason, the official reason, was for privacy reasons. So what they did is they started saying if you do an SSL search, you know, so like Google is now all HTTPS within Chrome, and depending on the browser you're in, if it's secure traffic, we won't pass through the keyword data. And they said that was for privacy reasons. However, if they do come from AdWords, you know, you pay Google for the ads, they will give you that keyword data. So to my mind, it was kind of like, well, and most SEOs were kind of like, well, that doesn't really ring true. You know, you're giving it if we pay for it, was kind of the bottom line on that. But why did they actually do it? Well, I don't know their full reasons, but I suspect it's because they just want to control and in some ways probably obfuscate a bit how people are coming to your site. They want to get away from keywords as being kind of the focus of SEO and more just around content on the site, and rather not people worrying so much about keywords. I suspect. I don't know. They'll give you their spin on it, but others will say a bit more cynically that it's because they just want to force you into paid. And that's not untrue, because I often say to clients, maybe you're not going to use paid advertising as a long-term channel, but let's use it for testing, because I know I can spin up an AdWords campaign, run it for a week, get some good keyword data about what's coming in, what drove the traffic and what engaged, and that's a useful testing tool. AdWords is a testing tool. And you kind of say, we'll trial this, you know, throw 1,000 at AdWords, get some data, and then we'll do the organic optimization for that. So it's a little bit like that. The question then is, so why do they provide it in Webmaster Tools? Possibly it's a little bit of, well, to get more people using Webmaster Tools because it's not that popular. And maybe it's just like they thought, oh, that's our other channel for doing it. What's funny is that they then have linked Webmaster Tools to analytics. So actually, we can actually go in here, see this search engine part. This actually is the link to Google Webmaster Tools and pulls in that queries data. So it's kind of a little bit strange. They'll give it to you here, but they won't give it to you in this organic keywords thing. There's one other advantage of Webmaster Tools, and that is over analytics actually for giving this, is that in Webmaster Tools it tells you the impressions, and it also tells you your ranking even if there was no impressions or clicks. Sorry, even if there was no clicks, because it shows impressions but not clicks. So in analytics, you only see that keyword showing if you actually got a traffic from it, right? A visitor. But Google Webmaster Tools will actually say, even if you didn't get a click for it, here's what you showed. You're actually showing for this term. So these terms, Angular Bootcamp, when people searched for that, there were 5 impressions, we appeared in the result, but we got no clicks. That's actually could be useful, because we might say, well, I like that, well, we're ranking number 17, that's probably why we've got so few impressions. But say this one, AngularJS Mentor, average position 7.3, we're on the first page for that term. There's not many searching for it, we didn't get any clicks, but maybe we'll tweak the meta description. Remember I talked about the meta description right at the start? Maybe we'll make that more compelling and got click-throughs. So that's a useful tool.
Can you just recap impressions versus clicks?
Okay, yeah, okay, good point. So what's an impression and what's a click? So if I search here, all of these, see all of these results, they got an impression. So they were in all their Google Webmaster Tools accounts, there was an impression on that term, but it's not until I click one and go through that it counts as a click. So normally you'll get lots of impressions, and you can imagine that the lower you are on the page, the less clicks you get. So all of those got the same impressions, but the ones down the bottom got much fewer clicks.
Impressions it shows.
Impressions it shows. And I'm not sure how clever it is in being able to show whether it's below the fold. It's normally just whether it showed on that list of 10. Even if it's below the fold, it's probably an impression. Not quite sure on that actually, but I suspect that's the case. Okay, but two things that I want you to look at is in the crawl section of Webmaster Tools, you can set up these 2 things. Remember we talked about sitemaps. You can actually set up sitemaps, the XML sitemap here, and submit it. And this, remember we were saying, was just a guide to what you'd like Google to look at on your site. And that's how you actually add it as a sitemap here. And it looks like we've got some warnings. Actually, I should check these. Here's another good thing about Google Webmaster Tools. It can tell you that some warnings about issues that you might have. Warning, high response time. So I suspect the forum module we have on the Fire Bootcamp site might be not performing particularly well, or on these particular days. So that's just something you could look at. So yeah, you get basically a bunch of things to check as well there. You can also do a fetch as Google. This isn't something you probably do a lot, but sometimes you might want to look at a site and say, well, what does Google see when it looks at a site? And the reason this is interesting is because if you have a lot of JavaScript that controls the content on your site, Google might not actually see that. This is actually a problem we still have, that Google doesn't crawl a lot of JavaScript. If you've got very client-heavy JavaScript running your site, and some of these JavaScript frameworks actually do push sites into this category, you might actually find that there's very little content that Google sees, because it doesn't really run the JavaScript on most frameworks. So you can test it here, see what Google sees. And there's also other tools, I was going to talk about this later, where you can check that kind of stuff. It's probably for an advanced session where we look at that and the frameworks and the tools, but something to keep in mind. Security issues, there's malware checks and things like that. Sometimes your site, if it gets hacked and people are injecting malware, your site will fall out of the Google index. It does happen reasonably often, and I've had friends where their site has just got hacked and they're worried about it's getting hacked, but the bigger thing is they're totally out of Google. So this will give you warnings, and you'll also get those warnings as emails as well, and that's it. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's probably a quick overview of Google Webmaster Tools. Yeah, question?
And where we submit our web page to Google, sometimes in article we find that we have to submit our web page to the Google.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how to submit it, like initially, the very first time, or just if it's a new page you want?
If we create a new page in our website, then how to submit that page to Google?
Right, okay. So the question is how to submit a particular page to Google. So I'll answer this in two ways. The first is if your site isn't known at all, it's a brand new site, probably the best way, there is actually a submit to Google services that'll submit to it, but the way I would do it is set up a Webmaster Tools account, and just by the fact of setting that up and verifying it, it'll actually say, is this your site? And then at the end, submit to Google. The other thing you can do, let's say you have a brand new page. Sorry, where was that Google, fetches Google? I often use this to trigger it. So if you've got a brand new page that you've added, I often just put it in here and do a fetch as Google, because then Google kind of goes, oh, I better look at this page. It might not instantly put it in the index, but at least puts it on its, raises awareness for it. And then the other thing is if you've got an XML sitemap, and that's automatically being updated by a tool, Google come back, probably not daily, but maybe weekly at least, check your sitemap and we'll actually see new pages and crawl them in that regard. There are other things you can do. I'm getting a bit off topic here, but if you've got a Google Plus account, promote it on Google Plus, because just that tends to at least initiate a crawl. It might not make it rank any better, but it'll get it crawling it. And also make sure you're linking to it on other parts of your site. So if your home page is getting hit by Google regularly, have a link to this new article, at least to kickstart, because Google will look at the home page and say, well, I'm linking to stuff on my home page, they must find that deem that as important, and so that's an extra hint to Google. So a whole bunch of different ways you could do it. Does that kind of answer, gives you some ideas, but Google Webmaster Tools is one of those things that you could use. Yeah. All right. Yep. Another question.
Are the other search engines being more open about how they do search engine optimization, or is it just Google who hides everything, or do they all do it?
Okay. So the question is, do other search engines make it easier to know their algorithm? They all pretty much hide their algorithm because they know that once someone unravels it, that it'll get spammed. But also they're always trying to improve the relevancy or quality, so they're always updating it anyway. So even if you published the algorithm, unless it's the big factors, probably wouldn't make that much difference. And also some search engines are much more, they all have different factors. So for example, Bing was actually earlier than Google in many ways in using social signals as more of part of their algorithm. People kind of found that by reverse engineering it, and they would get hints from, what's his name? Dwayne Forrester, I think is the main SEO guy at Microsoft and Bing. They would give some hints like that, but yeah, they're still not open. It's not as though they go, here's what you got to do. Some of the other, some of the big ones, I'm not that familiar with, say, the Chinese and the Russian search engines, but I know a lot of those do have a much bigger input based on on-page factors. Like, there used to be this thing called meta keywords. I don't know if anyone remembers this meta keywords thing that 10 years ago helped, it was part of that keyword stuffing bit. Google, Bing, and most of the engines don't use it, but I think some of the Chinese search engines actually use that as a big input. So they're all different. The reason I'm telling you that is because they're all different. They all have their different way of doing it. Answer your question, do they publish it? No, they're not as open. They do protect it. Yeah. Actually, no, it might be a bit off topic, but there are some DuckDuckGo is a search engine. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's kind of like a bit of a niche search engine. What's some of the other ones? But they were actually a bit more open about how they scored a page, and they would say what influences they had that made that a page to rank, but they don't drive that much traffic, so people don't pay that much attention. Okay, so that's quickly Google Webmaster Tools. I'll just jump into Bing Webmaster Tools so that you can see it. And this is actually for my site. It's not for the Fire Bootcamp site because I didn't actually have access to Fire Bootcamp. But it's a pretty similar interface. There's a general dashboard, links and stuff like that. A lot of these configuration bits are the same. Geo-targeting is not something I'm really going to talk about, but I'll just tell you that Bing actually is better than Google Webmaster Tools in some of these areas. If you want to geo-target parts of your site, Bing will actually give you a few more easier ways to do that. Reports, but the thing I wanted to show you, where was it? It was the research tool. The Bing Webmaster Tools actually has a really nice keyword research tool. So if you want to check whether the search volumes behind terms, this is actually a good one to use. So we can say, you know, Australia, and search for whatever it is, SharePoint. And what this is telling you is within Bing, not Google, so it's going to be small, but it'll tell you the kinds of terms that people are actually searching for. And where this is useful is when you're writing content, you might want to say, I know people find these particular terms of greater interest than others. Here's the terms. So you can kind of see, if you're targeting SharePoint 2013, quite a broad term, it's a lot more searches than people on SharePoint Designer. This is within Bing. And so that kind of stuff. So that can be a useful tool. We're going to come back to keyword tools later if there's time, but I just thought I'd mention that. Any questions about these so far? All make sense? They're easy to set up. Yes, it does. So the comment there was the Bing Webmaster Tools keyword research tool looks the same as the AdWords keyword tool. Yeah, very similar. That's quite right. We might look at the AdWords keyword tool later if we get time, because that's something I did want to show you. Okay, Webmaster Tools, we've looked at that. Bing Webmaster Tools. Other tools. Did I get to these? Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left. I was just going to mention in passing some other tools, just so that you're aware of them, but I'm not going to dive into them. We just don't have time. I'm going to talk about some other tools and some keyword tools, and then, if we have time, I was going to talk about a few other things like redirects, and plus some common questions I get. But I'll just quickly tell you about Google Places for Business and Bing Places for Business, just so that you're aware of them. If you do a search for SSW, I think we'll have it. See this thing on the right? That's a Google Places for Business account. And it's a separate tool that you use, Google Places for Business. And you set up an account there and you enter your location or locations. And that's also becoming part of Google Plus now. So they kind of transferred it over. You'll hear it called Google Places for Business. You'll also hear it called Google Plus Local Pages. That's something you should set up as well, because it's helpful, and if for no other reason, that you can control more of the page for your brand. You don't want, other stuff. As much of the page of Google result you can control, the better. That's Google Places. Bing Places has it as well. I'll just tell you, both of them have this verification process where you submit your site and then they'll either send you a postcard or they'll give you a call to verify your business. So that can be a bit of a hassle, and sometimes it takes a week or two to get the postcard with a little pin to verify your site. It's very annoying, but there's no way around it. They used to allow you just to verify by SMS, but most sites you can't do that for now anymore. Then the question is, should I start a Google Plus? Who has a Google Plus account? Yeah? Oh, actually there's a few. 5, 6, okay. if you've got Gmail accounts and you just inherited a Google Plus account, that's how most of them come about. Should you set it up? I actually tell people yes, you should do it, just so that you get a little bit of advantage of when you post links to your site, that it's a little bit of an indicator to Google to index that page, follow it and index it. So that's useful. There's also, whether you actually use Google Plus for social, the jury's still out on that. Search operators. This is just a little handy thing to show you. If you haven't come across this before, it's quite nice. If you want to find the pages that Google has indexed of your domain, you can just use that site operator and it'll give you a list of all your sites. It's included, and what's handy about this is it kind of lists them kind of in the priority order or importance that it deems for those links. So you can see TV.ssw comes up quite early. It's deemed reasonably important. By the way, look at that terrible meta description. So that's some work we should do on the SSTV page, whereas this one's much better. You can actually look at subdomains, so you could just limit it to that. So that's a handy thing. It's saying about 28,000 results, which may or may not be accurate, but the general trend, it'll give you a kind of a... Okay, there's something wrong there. This is interesting. Is that domain correct? Is that correct? Is that the right? Is it? Oh, okay, thank you. That's better. I was getting worried there. But that could be good. If you put in a site and you're getting one result or no results, then straight away you know there's something wrong to look at.
Sorry, so results is one result per page?
Thereabouts. But it gets difficult because if you've got a blog and you've got categories, you know how sometimes you go in categories and it's got 2014 January and it kind of treats that as the same as... But that's why I say it may or may not be accurate, but the general broad number. You know you've got in the hundreds, whereas SSW was in the thousands. Just use it as a kind of guide. Okay. Quickly whipping through a few things. So yeah. Keyword tools. There's a bunch of keyword tools that you can use. What I'll do is I'll flip into the AdWords one, which was mentioned just a second ago. So this is probably the best one to use. Google will give you search volume data, a general indication of search volume data. Now I'm actually in the SSW AdWords account. I'm not really going to go into the AdWords stuff, but if you set up an account and go into the tools, there's a thing called Keyword Planner. They used to actually make this available externally before, a couple of years ago, but they're really cutting down on that. You can't really get access to it. But what you can do is just search for volumes of keywords. So I'll put in that same SharePoint one again. Locations, I'll set this to Australia. Country. And you'll get, it groups them in AdWord ideas. Just pop over to keyword ideas. What happened? Get search, modify. Oh, sorry, I think I chose the wrong one. No? It should have given me... It should have actually given me a range of modified terms. Probably done something really dumb. What have I done? What it should have done is given me a list of the main ones plus variations. Where did that happen? Ideas. That's better. Sorry, I must have done something wrong before. But here you can see the search volumes. and also suggested bid. Now what that means is if you were going to bid on that term in AdWords, that's how much you'd be spending per click. Pretty crazy, right? $10 a click. These dollar numbers are wildly variable, and I just know from experience with the SSW AdWords we can get them much cheaper. But where they can be useful is that they can kind of indicate to you what's a competitive term and what's something that probably has purchase intent behind it. The higher you're paying per click, the probably more valuable the term is and shows more of a purchaser intent behind it. So
Don't necessarily want to buy a cheap keyword.
it depends, but yeah, so how do you choose your keywords to buy? That's probably, we could spend an hour on that, but the answer is you're probably going to use it as a guide to what's going to be important. If it's really cheap, probably it's cheap for a reason, because it doesn't tend to send targeted traffic that converts. But then another strategy might be, we just want to get a whole bunch of cheap traffic for whatever reason. I don't know. It would depend what your strategy is. Anyway, these search volumes are Google's indication of how many monthly searches there are for that filtering we said just for Australia. So about 10,000, that's quite high. That'd be a good term to try and rank organically for. Some of these others, you might say free SharePoint hosting, you might have thought that was the best term to try and rank for. Interesting that there's not many searches for it and it's still reasonably expensive, but just, yeah, no hard and fast rule, but it's probably not a good one to spend a lot of time on. There we go. Okay, we're just in the last couple of minutes. There are other terms, other tools you can use. Some free, some paid for, that you can use. But I'll just keep pushing through some final stuff, which I did just want to mention to you out of interest, although not in detail. A little bit about links and redirects and meta robot tags. Now, I'll just quickly tell you about links in the last couple of minutes. You know how I said, we started by saying on page, get the page title right, and that, because that's a really key influence to Google. And we definitely want to do that. But that's on one hand. On the other side, getting links is really important. And we're not going to talk about link building and all of that kind of stuff today, but I just did want to highlight to you why links are important. So I'm actually going to do a search. This is quite a common example. And it's the click here example. And I probably should have asked you, what do you think is going to rank for the term click here? The answer is Adobe Reader. But what's interesting is if you go to the Adobe Reader site, you'll never see the term click here, not in their page title, not in the content, not in anything. So you've got to say, well, why do they rank for that term, click here? And the reason is because when everyone links to the Adobe Reader site, they normally say click here to download Adobe Reader. So over the years, there's so many millions of links that use the word click here when they link through to Adobe Reader, that Adobe Reader ranks for that term. And so the lesson here is that links, especially targeted links and the anchor text or the text that's used to link through to you, is important. And it's actually swung the other way now because people tended to spam trying to get links with these juicy terms that looked so unnatural that Google actually kind of pulled back and penalized you for it. But putting that aside, that's the complexity of it. Getting links that link through to you with appropriate terms is the other key piece of the SEO puzzle. Get your site optimized, then when you're going out asking people to link to you or you're getting coverage in the media or something, getting those links with those terms is the big thing that'll help you. Okay, we're on the home stretch now. That's links, and we could spend hours just talking about the whole link building. There's a whole industry around link building and getting links to your site, which we don't have time for. But the other thing that I just did want to mention to you as web developers is to be aware of this concept of redirects. Who's familiar with redirects and web redirects? You've come across that? Yeah, okay, so most of you have. And redirects are important because especially, they won't really apply if you're building a new site, But if you're refreshing an existing site, you're replacing an existing site, and it already ranks the pages or the URLs from those old pages in the index. When you set the new site and it goes live, you want to set up redirects from those old links to the new URLs on your site. You want to do this for two reasons. One is just the user experience. Someone types in Google, clicks through, if it goes to an error, that's a bad experience. But two, Google will over time look at those links. It's always reviewing its index. If it finds those pages are going to errors, it'll just start dropping them out of its index. What we want to do is we don't want to lose this, what we call Google juice, or this link equity we've already accrued. We want to make sure that that's transferred to the new pages. So we do that with redirects and 301 redirects. I won't get into the different types of redirects, just remember 301 redirects. And that's really probably the final thing that I really wanted to mention. It's kind of up there with making sure your robots.txt file is correct, because quite often, this happens quite often, you'll see a new site go live and their traffic just plummets because they haven't set up redirects. It's one of those key bits that should be kind of the sign-off of every project. So as web developers, you should be aware of that. And when you're quoting sites, when you're developing sites, part of the go live process should always be making sure you've got the redirects in place to handle that. I've got some links there for examples of where that wasn't done and the pain that ensued. You just see companies kind of lose money and lose their business because they didn't do these simple things. All right, actually there's the example. That was their traffic. They went live with a new site, and that's their search engine traffic, just drops. And they were actually an affiliate commissions-based site, so that what they used to do was they used to get traffic for certain products, and then they'd shoot them off to a supplier to deliver that, and they'd get a cut of any purchase and the commission. So if they were very dependent on traffic and pushing through. If their traffic dropped, basically their business died. So it's that serious. Here's some common questions. Can I buy links to my site? The question is yes, you can. There's plenty of brokers and people that will buy links. Should you do it? No. Generally don't. You'll get caught, basically. Google will catch you. But there was an interesting discussion that was starting before. It's this risk versus return. So it's actually a business decision. Will you kind of break Google's guidelines for the short-term return? I'll go and buy a bunch of links, prop up my rankings, but the site will probably get burnt in time. If you've got a 3-month window and the client understands the risks and is happy with it, well, maybe go for it. I generally don't. In fact, I never have, but that's probably just fortunate that I haven't had clients that want that. So I would say don't, but it depends. What should I start with? When you're building your site and optimizing initially, I always say go for brand terms. And in your case, if it's a personal blog, your brand term is your name. So you want to rank for your name. And remember when Andrew Coates was talking about this kind of stuff, he wants to rank for Andrew Coates. You want to find out about a person. You should try and rank for that, or your company. Someone's going to Google my name and realize I'm not ranking #1. We can talk about that separate. Do social signals help rankings? Yes, but minor. But they'll drive traffic, which then people might find interesting, and they might actually end up linking to you. So I always say it's a useful thing. Get traffic or eyeballs any way you can. If you're delivering great content, there's a chance they might link to you and improve your rankings kind of indirectly. Is blog commenting okay? This often gets asked because it's been spammed to death in the past as a link building practice. Does that mean we shouldn't do it? No, we should still do it as long as it's quality and you're adding to the conversation. That's perfectly fine. You can always spot a spammy comment. I mean, yeah, it's not rocket science. Yeah, it's pretty easy to spot. Do meta keywords help? So we talked about meta description. Meta keywords, that was another meta thing. No, they don't. About 2009, Google actually officially came out and said, look, they don't contribute at all. So don't worry about that, or keyword stuffing and stuff. What are redirects? We actually did ask this. What are redirects? Are they important? Yes, and they're very important. Can I track conversions in Google Analytics? We had this question before. Yes, you can, and you should. And then the final question was, what about using JavaScript libraries? This is kind of a big discussion in itself, because you'll often find that a JavaScript framework because it's so client heavy, it's doing the calls or the AJAX calls or anything after the page is loaded and inserting that. Google doesn't see that. And there's this escaped fragment call, it's a meta call that you can use. There's a link here to a whole blog post which covers how to do that. It's probably more an advanced kind of thing, but there's also other things. If you ever wanted to check that, you can get plugins. I've just popped into Firefox because it's got some plugins where you can actually check pages like disable all JavaScript on a page and see how it renders. So I'm actually going to do that now and just show you the Fire Bootcamp page. And what's good is because JavaScript's disabled, there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't see. Like we don't see the videos, we don't see sliders, they're normally first to go. Quite often menus disappear, and that's bad because menus are a good hint of links, but we keep it. So the Fire Bootcamp site actually degrades quite nicely with JavaScript disabled, but a lot of others don't. And you'll often find these sites where it's purely built on a JavaScript framework. If you disable JavaScript, you actually just get a blank page. So that's something, that's a bit of an advanced kind of topic, but that's something to be aware of. So that's a very quick rush through those questions. Any other question? I think that covered everything. Yeah, that was the summary. So you did really well. Oh, sorry, question, yes.
Does video content on YouTube help SEO a lot?
Okay, so the question is, does video content help? Every piece of content that is useful helps. So I would always recommend any type of content. It could be a page, article, could be video, could be presentations, white papers, any kind of thing. Generally, the advantage with YouTube, you could embed it on your site and try and rank that page for having video content, but you can also use YouTube as another channel. You know, it gets a lot of traffic, obviously. So if you've got good videos, and obviously SSW TV is an example of where they're doing this, if you're getting engagement with that, that can actually be driving through traffic to your site as well. Now, is that video directly impacting your rankings for your site? Probably not so much, but here's the interesting thing. It can also help you own the page. So if we go back to here, and I think we had this, Fire Bootcamp. Oh, maybe we didn't. Oh yeah, we do. So we kind of own most of the page for that term. And just a couple of months ago, if you typed in Fire Bootcamp, you got all these bootcamp sites for, you know, fitness and down at the beach and stuff like that. But we own it through the domain, through Adam's blog talking about it, press releases we've done, Twitter, also video. So we're owning the page for that. So should we do it as content? Yes. Does it directly impact the ranking of this? Probably not. That's an answer. Although, actually, that's actually the page showing the video embedded. So actually, I'll take that back. It's actually what you'll often find is, you know, universal results. You'll actually see the video as part of the results, but pointing directly to YouTube. This actually one's pointing to the actual TV site. Not the Fire Bootcamp site, but the TV site. So it's working for us in some regard. Yeah, interesting.
Can you go to the next page? Because all the boot camps have actually set up blogs and blog about it.
Okay, cool.
They probably don't have enough people just.
No, well, we should start linking to you. So is there are any jumping out here that I should be looking at? Might have gone too far. What's the domain of one of you?
Ludwig, well done, Ludwig. Hey, the most Google juice in the room.
Sorry, this one? Oh, cool. Good, and you've got Fire Bootcamp in your page title there. That's great. Yeah, so your meta description, shall we use you as, who's Ludwig? Yeah, right. We'll give you some clicks. So there's some usage data for you. Google saying, wow, that's down the page. And they're still clicking through. This is important. So, you know, but where is this? Is this it here? Okay. Oh, okay. So it's interesting that the meta description wasn't working properly because this is a WordPress theme. I would have thought that had it. Oh no, you probably just haven't got the meta description set. We can look at this, lately. But you've got the page title is just actually coming from the title of the post, so that's all good. You've just embedded. So isn't that interesting? So this actually contradicts kind of where I was going with the question before. I was saying just having the video embedded wouldn't let you rank, but actually, because you've got no content, you've got a sentence.
I've got a tag on. It's got a H1 like that.
He's got the H1, but the video, the question was about the video. Does video help ranking? You've got the title and that's all good, but it's not as though your page is 1,000 words of content but you're still ranking. So it definitely helps. You got your page title. You've got video that's content. Raj, you should say, excuse me, Ludwig, can you put a link to me from Raj pointing to your website? And that's a part of link building. He's going to do some outreach, and then you'll say, well, I'll give you a link if you link to me, and then there'll be a bit of reciprocal linking, and you've got to be careful you don't do that too much. But anyway. Yeah. Bitcoin, or the other day, there's a site called Beercoin, where you just trade digital beers, but that's great. Okay, any other questions?
One more, which is probably a big one, but maybe a good one to go out on, is for these guys who are trying to raise their profile, what are the tips for them to get there? How do they, what are the best ways for them to go about getting juice?
So getting a bit of outreach? Yeah. So the first thing you'll do is try and hit up your friends. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Good. Yeah. So the question was, you're starting out, you've got a blog. What's the first things you start with, trying to get some links or some Google juice from other people? So there's a few things. One is hit up all your friends, if they've got a blog, to at least link to you. And you used to do this in the past, when blogging was kind of new, you'd say, oh, by the way, just noticed so-and-so is now blogging, here's a good article. So try and get some appropriate link. Hit up Scott Hanselman, try and get, no, you won't do that. But if you can get some people to link, the more prominent the person linking to you, the better, obviously. So it wouldn't be unreasonable for Adam on his blog to do like a weekly post that said, oh, and here's some blog posts from people in the Fire Bootcamp, check them out, and that's some link juice that he's driving them. Do a bit of social stuff as well, so you can at least get some traffic through, get people to know. So if you've got a Twitter profile or a Twitter following, you can at least promote your content there. That won't directly give you link juice, but they might, if they find it useful, they might want to give you a bit of support and link to you from their site. The other thing is you can actually do comments, blog comments on other sites. So let's say on the Fire Bootcamp, because we've got a blog on Fire Bootcamp, I think, but let's say for one of the blog posts there that talks about it, you might write a blog post yourself and then come back to the Fire Bootcamp one and say, yeah, I really loved this session. By the way, I've written about it on my own blog, and there's a blog comment. Now, whether that link carries much juice, may or may not, but you've actually raised your profile on the blogger's post via the comment, and they may well update their post to link to you. May or may not, depending on how close the relationship. If you add something of high value, and you say, I've blogged about this on my blog where I go into detail about whatever, they'd be more inclined to link to you. So that's kind of the start, how it starts. It can be difficult starting out, and the other thing about link building is that it's hard work. People are always looking for this magic bullet or something automated, and it rarely works. But that's the way I'd start. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? You've been very good. Thanks for sticking with me for so long. I hope you found it useful, and yeah, thanks for your attention. Enjoy lunch. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
I've been running SSW for 20 years. I've also been a lecturer at the University of Technology, Sydney for many years, and I think the gap is getting wider between what they're being taught and what employers need for the guys to hit the ground running and be able to do real work.
Looking for a job as a junior developer can be really tough. There are so many applicants out there, and it's really hard for an employer to separate one from the other. They try really hard, but it's a challenge for them.
One of the problems when you come out of university is everything you learn at university isn't directly transferable into the enterprise.
I think I've seen all the problems that companies are having with new recruits. That's why we created Bootcamp.
The Bootcamp is a place where you'll go for 9 weeks, 40 to 60 hours a week, and do one thing and one thing only. That is learn to code in Microsoft technologies.
You're going to be learning MVC5, HTML5. These technologies are really important because the uptake in the industry is huge. So this course will just fill that gap between university and starting work.
At the Bootcamp, you have a mentor, and that mentor gets you over a challenge you may have straight away, so you can go on to the next challenge. Instead of sitting there for hours searching Google and trying to find answers that sometimes you just can't find.
It's important to have a mentor because it stops you going off track. It stops you getting stuck on things that aren't really important. It happens time and time again where people are going through things that they found on the internet.
What they really need is experience and hands-on coding. And this bootcamp is going to give people the hands-on experience in coding for 9 weeks. Because if you can do as opposed to learn, you have your best chance at getting job ready for your first job in the industry.
It's not an easy course. For 9 weeks, you're thrown into the fire. You live and breathe .NET code. You live and breathe learning best practices and working as part of the team. You'll be working a minimum of 40 hours and mostly 60 hours a week, every week.
Becoming job ready is more than just learning how to write code. You need to know how to work in a team, you need to know how to gather requirements, you need to know how to use the tool set, the Microsoft stack of tools. And during the bootcamp, we're going to be teaching you all these other aspects, the soft skills of development that, by yourself, learning from a book, learning through Google or videos, you just will never learn.
It's not just coding skills, it's also communication skills and the ability to work as part of a small team.
The whole course is run using Scrum, so you'll learn Scrum inside out. At SSW, we've been using Scrum since literally day one, so you'll learn from all our experiences, and you'll just be able to join the company at the end of the course, and you'll be able to fit straight in their team, so you'll be a big asset to any company that you join.
One of the most exciting parts for the students is the Gala at the end of the 9 weeks.
The Gala is where you showcase what you've done to a room of prospective employers. This is where the rubber meets the road.
At this Gala, you're going to be able to present the work that you've created and what you've learned, not to your mum and dad, but to real employers, people looking for junior developers. And at that Gala, you're going to be able to present and then talk and discuss with them. And we're going to help you try and get a job at the end, because we believe that the graduates of the bootcamp are the best graduates on the market.
And that is a damn lot better than sending your resume to recruiters who you can only hope will put your best foot forward.
By spending 9 weeks intensely in the bootcamp, learning nothing and doing nothing but .NET programming, and then creating a real app that you can show your prospective employer is impressive. It's impressive because it shows you're passionate, and it shows that you've gone through an incredibly difficult course that most people would never go through. And that's the type of person that we look for at SSW.